welcome to California Life podcast this early morning. Today I'm joined by my good friend, now partner, Mr. Robert Cody, known as the Cody, and the one and only living legend, Mr. David Kotok. Gentlemen, welcome to our studio and thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you from the East Coast to the West Coast. And we don't have to go fly over the middle of the country to do it. Look.
Well, I do hope that we will at a certain point meet up all together. And before we dive into the questions, because we have so many things that we want to ask you, Mr. Kotok. So myself and Mr. Bob, Mr. Robert, who is known as Mr. Cody, and I'm sure that we'll clarify why. We've met because of a non-financial project. Although it does involve finances, we are working on a film based on a true story, military justice system, and all questions related to that. How did you gentlemen meet?
Are you asking
Well,
Cody, or are you asking
Both
David
of you gentlemen.
Kotar? Oh,
Both of you
well,
gentlemen.
I defer to Cody first. So, Cody, you tell them how we met.
oh, sure. Well, I'm involved in a more advanced option group known as Options Animal. And our guest speaker was Mr. David Kotok. And I was excited that Mr. Eric Hell was able to bring David to our meeting. And when David spoke, uh, rarely do you get to hear someone with the experience as Mr. Kotak. And so I was really excited to not only to hear him, but I was able to meet with David and talk to him. And I told him about our podcast, and here we are. Here he is. I'm really excited, and I know that our California live viewers, you're going to learn a lot. So please pay attention to Mr. Kotak. This is a rare opportunity that we get someone with as much financial caliber as Mr. Kotak. So, uh, Mr. Kotak, really welcome again. I'm really pleased that you're with us today.
Well, Cody, thank you. You am humbled, and I appreciate your kind remarks. Um, California has a place in my heart. I have visited the state many times, from San Diego to the Muir Woods, and been involved in all sorts of conferences and meetings. And just looking around, my firm, Cumberland, long ago had an office at La Costa.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of history there. One of my children lives in Sebastopol. So I have a grandchild there, and so I'm happy to say hello to your viewers and to you, and to be part of the next hour with you. And my question for you is
Okay.
why? Well, you're going to ask me questions, but my question for you is why are you Cody, and why aren't you Cody squared or 2x Cody?
Well, I'm in a morning live trading room, and I know about 800 viewers are going to be watching this podcast, and uh, it's part of a group called VectorVest, and it's a live trading room. And if I went by Bob in there, I get confused because there's just too many Bobs in this world. So I went by Cody, and then for some reason someone called me Cody, and then it just stuck. So yeah, that works. That way, if I hear Bob, really, I'm going to get confused. But Cody, I know people are reaching out to me. So yeah, that's how it works.
Well, Cody, it's nice to be with you this morning.
Great, great, thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Bob, for sharing the Cody story. I was expecting something more, with suspense, with some drama, maybe, with some coding, uh, but apparently it's a lot more simple. Um, Gentlemen, I would love to start the podcast, if I may. Mr. David, let's start with the beginning. I know that you are extremely accomplished financier and specialist in finances, but everything has roots. And I'd love to begin our podcast with learning a little bit about where did you grow up, what kind of family environment shaped your early worldview that impacted who you are today.
Well, do remember the book, Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. Now, that's an old book, so young people may not remember it or may not know of it. But I spent the first 10, 11, 12 years of my life working in the family grocery store in southern New Jersey. And that was my daily job when I wasn't in school. And I learned the best course in economics, pricing, inventory, calculation of bills. In those days, you had to take a brown paper bag and you had to write the price and you had to add them up. So I had to learn to add in my head, not on a machine. And that was my formative years. Family uh, store closed in the 1950s. And it was founded by my great grandfather, for whom I'm named. And I have a great photograph in my office, which you won't be able to see, which shows the corner of 6th and Landis in Vineland, New Jersey, David Kotok, fruits and vegetables, and it was taken in 1907. So that's some family background. All the rest, the academic stuff and the papers and the books and all that, came later. The most important piece was to learn some business structure as a kid and to learn how to get along with people in a civil way. Something that in the current framework in our country is eroding or lacking. You can disagree with people, you can be civil about it. You don't have to be a hater. Cody and I can agree on something or disagree on something. You and I can agree on something or disagree on something. And then we can get along. I remember in politics, Ronald Reagan was president. Tip O'Neill was the Speaker of the House. And their politics were 95% in disagreement. And they would fight politically over policy issues. And then they'd go have a drink together. And that's the way the system works best in finance, in economics, in politics, in geopolitics, in research disagreements. And I've spent half a century in those kinds of discussions in my career and in my life. That's how the system works well. And the biggest thing that troubles me, and I'm an old man, I'm 82 years old, my time ahead of me is limited, and I worry for the country because of the lack of civility. Let's get along. We don't have to kill each other. And I don't know if it's a function of age and evolution of age to think about the current time as less civil, or it is less civil. For all we know, in ancient Greece, the elders felt the same way about the youngers. We don't know. So I struggle with that. But to me, it seems we have lost this civility. And to me, if you replace civility and discourse and dialogue and a conversation about a policy issue, about money, about direction, of policy, whatever it happens to be. If you can't have a civil exchange, then what you do is isolate each view, which then gets into an echo chamber and is reinforcing and reinforcing and reinforcing. And that's what troubles me. If I have a minute, one more example. You're in the media world, you're in the film world, you're in the place in the country where there's high sensitivity to this. I still research, I still have people who help me, I still write and publish, as you know. And we watch Sean Hannity and Rachel Maddow. Now, why? Not because we agree or disagree with either one of them, but because we want to see the messaging that they are reinforcing every single day with their narrow constituency, which is isolating opinions and views based on what they're seeing every day. So someone cannot stand Rachel Maddow and watches Hannity, and someone cannot stand Hannity and watches Rachel Maddow. And when I tell people, they say, where do you get your news? I said, if I want factual news, I go to Reuters, or I do research and read. Or if it's in the financial arena, I go to a place like Bloomberg, because Bloomberg consciously tries to stay politically neutral. They do a pretty good job at it. And what they are doing is reporting information. But if I want to see how the country's moving and there's an event, I watch how it's reported on MSNBC and CNN and also on Fox and also on Newsmax. And you get 4 different stories. And in the old days, I hate to be a pest with that framework. In the old days, if you turned on Cronkite, you got the same basic story as if you went to the other network. The nuance is different, but there was a scruple, there was a principle, there was a discipline, and it said, try to relay to the viewer, to the reader, to the recipient, factual accuracy. And I don't know where this goes. I'm publishing a piece on the Grok use of anti-Semitism, the Meckel Hitler exposure, and how it happened. And I hope that will publish this coming Sunday. And in the piece, which I've finished drafting, we are in final editing now for Sunday publication. I drew a comparison with Joseph Goebbels 100 years ago as the propaganda minister for Hitler. And what did Goebbels do? Goebbels started out as a local politician in Berlin. And then he got into the Reichstag and into the parliament. And when Hitler came to power, he became the minister of propaganda, the strongest position, the number 2 position. And what did he do? He developed a radio in German. The translation would be the People's Radio. And they sold it to the citizens in Germany and then in Austria. And as the Hitler's expansionist policy took place, more and more, and they sold it at a deep discount. They even had installment financing for poor households. And that radio controlled the frequencies. So if you bought this radio, which you could buy more at less expense and be your news source, there was no television, there was no AI, there was no internet. You had a radio that could not tune to the British Broadcasting Company. You had to receive the state message. And that was Goebbels' technique. And it turned out to be an application which, as we know history, was murderous at the end, in millions of casualties and victims. That's 100 years ago. I shudder to think what a Joseph Goebbels would do in today's world with AI and the applications that are being used that each of us has to confront in split-second reaction time. So for an old man, that's my worry, not for me. I have children. I have grandchildren. I worry for them. This is a hell of a way to start an opening, Cody. But
Well,
it,
I would have to agree to really just about everything you said. Mr. Kotok, you're all about wisdom, experiences. You've had such a good, full life. You're well admired. I'm sorry, but today's generation, uh, yes, they're smart. They love their smartphones, but they're getting their news in small little clips. And I think that's really changing how people get their information and interpret it.
we'll find out. For all you know, I just chased away half your viewers.
No, no, our viewers are gonna love what you have to say. And yeah, Victor, you want to continue on?
Of course. Well, we do align with the values which you present, and that is why our platform has been growing quite successfully here in California and now beyond California, nationwide. We share the information the way it is without any agenda or that kind of stuff, which is dangerous for society. And again, we're very happy to have you with us. And when our viewers would hear that from you, that's also very important. Mr. Kotok, you mentioned the book which you've read when you were little. Except for the books, could you share with us about any other mentors, maybe some pivotal experiences in your youth that set the path towards economics and finance, except for the family business?
Oh my gosh. In my youth. But in my book, there's a discussion about epidemics, pandemics, and plagues and the shocks of them and how they evolved. And the section of the book is on the United States and its history. My new book is really 4 books, but the section on the U.S. history focuses on the last 3 uh, uh, epidemics or pandemics that impacted the Federal Reserve in the United States. And that's the Spanish flu in 1917, 1922. People think of it as 1918 because of a book by John Barry on, but the range was really about 5 years. And the Asian flu in 1957, and recently COVID. There was a Hong Kong flu interlude, but it's mixed up with the Vietnam War, and so it's very hard to isolate something from it. But in 1957, the Asian flu was spreading around the world. And in 1957, I was a Boy Scout, and I was working in a Boy Scout camp. I had been a scout for a couple of years, and at this point, I was a counselor. For those who remember the Boy Scouts, I had advanced. I was an Eagle Scout, took it very seriously as a teenager. And the Boy Scouts had a jamboree in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. All this is recited in a chapter in the book, and I'll tell you where it's going in 1 minute. So, thousands of young teenage boys and their counselors and troop leaders and all converge on Valley Forge, Pennsylvania for a jamboree that is a national event. What strikes me and what I wrote about in that very section is how they created the super spreader event of a flu, the Asian flu, which they all took home. And 8 weeks later, somebody got sick and died in Louisiana, and somebody went to California and got sick, and somebody else. And that piece of history in 1957 is close enough to modern times so that we could learn from it and we can examine it because we have relatively current forms of records about it. If we go into antiquity, it's much harder. But the 57 Asian flu is a lesson in what a pandemic looks like when nobody in the federal level thinks about it, when the Federal Reserve, which was under William McChesney Martin as chair at the time, does nothing, whether there is no federal program to resuscitate the economy, to help cushion the shock. 57 is a lesson. And in that lesson, it's not being discussed in the history book or in the analysis of preparation of the country. And the lesson from the 57 flu is there is no lesson. So it's what you don't see that enables preparation for future shocks. And that's why we wrote that section into the book. COVID, of course, everybody knows it's recent. And history, everybody knows we have the Peloponnesian War and the first plague in Athens 2,500 years ago. But the 57 I put in the book for what we didn't know, didn't observe, didn't learn, didn't implement, and paid a price. And people don't think of it now. But the casualty rate from the Asian flu was very substantial. People died, a lot of people sick. I have, when I do this and I give a speech or I write about it, older people, it's happened to me recently, just not maybe 2 months ago. Somebody raises their hand in the back of the room and they say, I had it. Now you got to be old to raise your hand and say, I had the Asian flu. I got it when I was 8 years old. So I strayed from your question, Victor, but that's a story. It's a story from the book. It's a lesson from history. And it can teach a lesson if people are willing to pay attention to it.
Well, then I would follow up with the question, have we learned from that lesson when we faced COVID?
No.
That was pretty straightforward. which things we didn't learn, and why I'm asking this, because the former president Joseph Biden, he mentioned that there will be another pandemic.
So I answered no quickly. The Federal Reserve learned. And that's why we had a very substantial policy response, which subsequently now is criticized. But it's very easy to criticize the football game on Monday.
Yeah.
In real time, when you have to play it, it's another matter. So the background, the history in money and finance, it is pretty clear. The Federal Reserve started to pay attention to the shocks of epidemics, pandemics, and plagues in the 1990s, and the research papers and how that developed is part of the story that's in the book. And then along came SARS in 2003. I was involved at the time in some of, with a think tank, the Global Interdependence Center. And I held and chaired a conference at the University of Pennsylvania on SARS, and another one I co-chaired with a colleague on bird flu a couple of years later. The Fed at that time was worried about the shock. And so they were preparing mechanisms that they never had to use. because SARS didn't evolve. It came close, and COVID is a close first cousin, but it didn't evolve. And that was the luck of the mutation. One mutation, one speck goes left instead of right, and we kill a lot of people and make them sick. And the opposite happens and it goes away. And that's a random mechanism in nature and has been forever. So the Federal Reserve learned. Why? They had prepared earlier and then didn't have to use the preparation, but they could take it off the shelf. And they did. And in my opinion, the Federal Reserve prevented a Great Depression with massive array of financial programs. At the same time, we had fiscal stimulus too. So we had both engines, fiscal and monetary, full blown, and we avoided a depression, in my opinion. So people would argue, but I that's my view. So yes, we learned. Did we learn in the application of preventive medicine? No. Look at what's happening. Look at misinformation. Look at measles outbreaks in the country where there's a vaccine that has long established history of prevention. Tell me why a child in the United States should die from measles. It's unthinkable. It's a totally preventable death. Why? Why do we now have some polio cases when we had eradicated it? Why? That's part of the civility, misinformation, restructure of how we convey ideas and how we learn and how we teach and how we communicate, and division instead of collective exchange for improvement. So we're busy dividing, not coalescing, and we're paying a price for it. And we see it every day. Now, will the pendulum swing back? That remains to be seen. We'll find out. You'll find out. I don't know whether I'll find out. If I have a few more years, maybe I'll find out too. You guys are younger than I am, so you'll have a better post to observe.
Well, I'm sure that God will bless you with many more years ahead and healthy years, so it's not going to be
D-
a question, an
Don't
issue.
don't be sure.
I wish, sir.
That's better.
Well, thank you for the correction, Mr. Bob. Would you like to add any notes, anything to the topic we've been discussing?
Well, actually, I would like to delve into just some current events. Mr. Kotak, your take on, we all saw President Trump standing next to Jerome Powell, and they couldn't agree on the what the true inflation rate is. So, uh, and I'll also add, so our viewers know that our S&P 500 has post fresh record highs. So if you can just comment on that, Mr. Kotak.
Okay, so let's do two things. So we're going to talk about the S&P record high, and we're going to talk about this question of inflation. What is it? How much is it? And what does the Federal Reserve do or not do correctly or incorrectly? Does that work?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So for the S&P, take 10 stocks out of the 500. They are in the tech sector. The tech sector is focused on AI. AI, if we understand what it is a neural network with high computational speed, and therefore it is a mechanism to calculate a million things in a split second versus a much smaller number. Very powerful tool. extraordinary powerful tool, which in the present is only beginning to evolve. We see it in language models and generative language models, but we also see it in all sorts of research, medical areas, record keeping. It has not learning. Machines don't learn. Machines are taught how to figure things out, and we call that machine learning. But the responsibility of what the machine learns is still in the hands of the instructor, who's a person. Sometimes we introduce tools to aid the instructor in the instruction, and we're doing that. So we're in this area. Now you go back to the S&P and say, okay, there's 500 stocks. They're in a dozen industry sectors. Some of them are boring. Some of them are exciting. Collectively, all of them reflect the publicly traded United States of America's publicly traded companies, and they get about 75% of their revenue within our borders, and the other 25% from outside, and they translate that into earnings, and those earnings are the driver of the prices of those stocks in the end. Opinions or other things, we have all kinds of sentiment. The way stock prices move is a subject of discussion that has been underway for over a century. But as a practical matter, the valuation of stocks is how much money do they make year after year after year. And if the amount of the profit grows, the stock price rises. So that's the fundamental structure. S&P 500 index is 500 stocks. 10 of them are 40% of the weight of the index today, capitalization weight. NVIDIA is the giant.
Yeah, the Mega 7. Yeah.
So if you say, what about the other 490? And let's look at them. And let's look at how their earnings are being impacted. And let's look at what they have to contend with interest rates and tariffs and inflation risks and employment cohorts and deportation shocks and all the things we know that we see in the country. And then we look at the 10. We see the divide. So the S&P 500 sets a new high, surged, no question about it. If you bought SPY yesterday, you bought the index at cap weight within a few pennies, and if you own it a day later and the price of that is up, you have a profit. If it's down, you have a loss. What drove it? The 10. The huge performance is coming out of less than a dozen securities. You can say Mag 7, but I think it's better to say the Tech 10.
Okay.
But either way, it's a debate. The principle's the same. So as long as this earnings growth trajectory continues, you can justify price earnings multiples at 30 and 40 times if the companies that are delivering those earnings do not have the pressure of leverage, so they don't have the issue of interest rates or debt finance. Pretty much that's the case. And they maintain and accelerate that earnings growth trajectory. Will that happen is a debate. In my opinion, the easy money in the tech sector is behind us. It had to be made when there was a question, when you were taking the risk of whether or not there would be a successful unfolding in that area. Now we already know it is a successful unfolding. We also know that first user privilege is being eroded by worldwide companies. So you look at NVIDIA, say it's a great company. No question about it. Microsoft was a great company, is a great company. But SK Hynix in Korea has a 12-layer chip, not an 8-layer chip. And it's powerful. And there are dozens of imitators now. So first user benefit over time erodes. So it may be there for a long time. Everybody still blows their nose with a Kleenex. By the way, it's not a Kleenex, it's a tissue, but it's replaced the name. So first user capacity is enormous, and it's underway now. My view, at 40% of the weight of the market, we have history to tell us what happens. There was a period when the financial bank sector was approximately a third of the market weight. Then we had a financial crisis. There was a period in which the healthcare sector, biotech, was a third of the weight of the market. In 1980, when the oil price in the 70s, I remember it, I was in the business then. The oil price went from the Middle East War in 1973 from $3 a barrel to $12 a barrel to $30 a barrel. $30 a barrel for oil in 1980 when the Shah of Iran was deposed was enormous for a price.
Yeah.
The energy sector was almost a third, 30% of the market weight at its peak. Now, what happened after that? There was transition, change, energy efficiencies, substitution for natural gas for oil, other evolution. The energy sector over the next several decades went from 30% of the market weight to single digit 6% of the market weight, which means if you invested in the energy sector when it looked like it was only going to one direction, and in 1980, Exxon had that famous chart where the $30 oil was going to go to 100. If you bought the energy basket, then you underperformed for 40 years because the weight is so high. So now you have to ask yourself a question. At what point do I take some money off the table in the tech sector? When am I willing to be underweight the tech sector? Which means I have to be overweight something else, which could be cash, it could be bonds, or it could be some other sector. The cheapest sector, in my opinion, right now, are the biotechs. Huge numbers of biotech companies that have been through burn rates for years in the development of marvelous technology to preserve or extend life or reduce the impact of disease. And what are they trading for? Net cash. They're at net cash. Company had $1 billion. It now has 100,000 and it's got phase 2 trials, and it has succeeded into phase 2B, and it is showing evidence of altering an outcome of someone who has some form of disease. And that stock is trading for nothing. It's been given away. So I'm a believer if you're a long-term investor and you take a basket full of these companies, one of them, it will be the biotech equivalent of NVIDIA. Now, I own a few of them. So that's where
Which
I
ones do
see
you
the
own?
mark. I won't do that one.
Okay.
I will give you the sector and the recommendation to go take a look at it.
Well,
And it's
investors can always invest in the index, and I'm sure you're going to say with AI, these medical biotechs really have some really good opportunities to be more efficient within their own company, but just to be able to move faster through the FDA trials. Isn't that correct?
Well, we're going to find that out. There's a pro and a con, but the FDA rules and the slowness of the process happened because of thalidomide decades ago. And you look back in that and you say, gee, the Europeans approved thalidomide and pregnant women had distorted, permanently damaged children from the drug. And in the US, the slowness prevented that from American citizens and their families. So the thalidomide effect probably caused drug approvals to be delayed for decades, to have great care. So we traded speed, for more rigorous regulation. That's an exchange. That exchange has several outcomes. We do have ways to bypass under certain circumstances. I have two types of leukemia. One of them has been diagnosed since 2018, and I am treated with a marvelous second generation drug by AstraZeneca, and that drug has been available to me for 4 years, and it hasn't put me in remission. It has suppressed the acceleration of that particular cancer. I have the cancer. It's managed. I have side effects. I put up with them. I learn how to manage my life carefully, and I'm still here. When I was diagnosed in 2018, that drug didn't exist. It was in the first stage of trials. And my medical team, I asked them, I said, what's this look like? And they said, well, you got a 50% chance of living 5 years. But the last time I had a meeting with the head oncologist or the research oncologist in leukemia type 1 that I have, I said, where are we now? He says, I think you got an 80% chance of living 5 years. I said, 7 years ago, I had a 50% chance of living 5 years. Now I got an 80% chance of living 5 years, and I'm 7 years older. That's pretty good math. The second leukemia is much harder. It was diagnosed in January, and I have the risk of having to take a poison to treat it. Now, I guess the good news is the poison that would treat it with about a 70% effective rate didn't exist 5 years ago. The problem is it's a 70% rate. So my oncologists have said to me, look, as long as you can manage and the cancer remains chronic and lazy, we want to monitor you every month. We're going to do blood work. I get stuck like a pincushion. Meanwhile, there's 6 trials going on focusing on the second type of leukemia. So AI can map the compositional structure and has for me. That's not chat GPT. That's not I'm going to go to school at a 19-year-old and say to a computer, write a 500-word paper for me on. That's the application, and the productivity and improvement that comes from that application may prolong my life. I'm involved in funding research studies at a cancer center to try to examine this question along with others. There's a bunch of us who, as is typical in these things, people who have some ability and have a disease tend to focus philanthropy in the direction of what they are encountering, not for their own benefit, but for somebody who may come later. At least that's how it looks to me. So we have marvelous opportunity, extraordinary. we also have huge risk. I saw an AI system that has, Wired magazine had an extensive discussion about it, which examined the directional applications for 40 new treatments or drugs for diseases because they were able to run so many probabilistic models so quickly. Research that would have taken 10 years is done in 10 minutes or 10 hours. Marvelous. Somebody said, wait a minute, let's use the system and see if we'll investigate toxicity. So they use the application to say, generate toxic formulas that kill people. Well, guess what? There's a lot of them. And they too are in the hands of bad actors. One of them's in Moscow. I mean, Putin has used chemical warfare in Ukraine. That's a fact. That's not a dispute. He won't admit it. So I had that discussion in the application. I said, so you developed with a tool toxicity in use of war, in the use of warfare. What was the next step? The next step was immediately to say to AI, what are the antidotes against each toxin? Now look what I've just described. I've just described a tool of warfare that didn't exist 2-3 years ago. Is that priced in any stock? I don't know. How do you do that? I don't know. What does it take to rethink a defense budget? I don't know. We're at Camp Kotok in 2 weeks. We're going to have 4 sessions on defense, funding it. What are the tools, technological applications, thinking about drones? All that's going to go on in Maine. I did the last strategy conference call for one of our panels this week. So we're in a wild exploration without limits. Oh, well, everything has limits. Without limits as we are accustomed to think about them. Very exciting, very positive, very risky, intensely negative, and I hope and pray the pendulum of the discussion swings to civility so people of goodwill, like you and your viewers and us and the people I met at the conference where we met each other, can set aside differences and have civil discussion to make the world a better place, not a worse place. And that's what I'm going to try to do the rest of the time I have.
Well, we definitely join you on this mission. We are working on making the world a much better place than it is, and we also see multiple different threats. So you just mentioned about the camp, the Kotok camp. Could you please share with us, with our viewers, a little bit about it?
Sure. So before 9/11, I would go up in the Maine woods and go fishing to a place 2 hours north of Bangor, Maine on the Canadian border. It's very remote, pristine watershed, lovely area. And I would always say to a couple of people, let's go away for a weekend, go out in the woods away from everything where we don't have distractions and we can have conversation about the world, different issues, and just relax. Most of the time, people would say no. I'd invite them to come with me, 1 or 2 or 3, sometimes 6, sometimes 4. Then we had a meeting of the National Association of Business Economics that was in New York in the World Trade Center, and we were in the South Tower. I was in the South Tower. I was lucky to get out alive, and I am very fortunate. And my colleagues, all of us, were in a plenary session at a breakfast meeting when the North Tower was struck. So we heard it, the building shook. The speaker was the president of Morgan Stanley at the time. He came down from his office to make the breakfast speech. And I have heard him say, that speech saved my life because I had been on the ground floor. And I was on the ground floor. I would have been up otherwise in a tower in the meeting. So we had a reunion 6 months later, about 6 months later. One of the guys comes to me. He's director of research at the Federal Reserve Bank in Dallas at the time, Harvey. Harvey says to me, you know that trip you always invite me to that I say no? I want to come with you next year. Somebody else says, you know, I never thought I would say this. I'm going to come with you next year. So we went from 3, 4, 6, 5 to 20. Then I had a conversation with Steve Leisman at CNBC. I was a CNBC contributor for a number of years under contract with them. And Steve says, what is it? What are we doing? I said, so I tell him what it is. So he goes to the producer at CNBC and he said, why don't we take a crew and do it? So we did. So Leisman and I were in a canoe. We were on CNBC. They were shooting us fishing. I did an interview with Leisman from the deck of the fishing lodge at 8:30 on a Friday morning when the employment report was being released. This was in August. And we go to break at 8:30. CNBC is running the ads that they do, and then they go back to the 8:30 employment report. Steve Leisman and I are standing on the deck. We have a camera on us. We have no monitor. All we have is the camera. You know how that works. Everybody else in the world can see what's going on. All you can see is the lens and and no monitor.
Right.
Becky Quick, somebody in the control room at CNBC, comes up with this idea, Camp Kotok. So it's flashing across the bottom. We don't know it. Becky Quick, we go back live, and Becky Quick says to Steve, how are things at Camp Kotok? The two of us don't know what she's talking about. Okay? So she follows up, and that's how the name stuck, and that's where it came from. Becky Quick gave us the name Camp Kotok. I didn't make it up, and I couldn't get rid of it. So it's been around for a long time. Now we have 50 people, we have 50 beds, we have every guide and canoe, and we take the entire peninsula and the lodge, which is a 9-acre peninsula that juts out in the lake, and it's pristine water. The watershed is all protected and preserved. The shoreline has not changed in years. And on the other side of the area is the Passamaquoddy Indian Reservation land. We've helped them with some philanthropy and helped some people in the reservation, and they let us go on their land and have lunch grounds. And so that's the event, and it's been covered by people all over the world, CNBC and Bloomberg and New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Everybody's been there. For me, this will be my 36th year, and we'll see if I can get to 37, but I got to get through 36 first.
Would you consider having us covering it, sir?
Well, you can't cover it this year. I don't even have a place for you to sleep. So you would have to stay in a pup tent with the mosquitoes. But let's get through this and look at it next year. We've had camera crews and interviews from all over the world. So I think it's possible to get visas from California to come to Maine. And if so, we could work on it.
Well, definitely
Yeah,
visa.
that'd be great, David. I have friends who actually really they're so excited about being at the camp, and they love the late night poker games. So I
Oh
get to
my
hear a
God.
little bit about that.
If you heard about the poker games, you now know everything you need to know about Camp Kotok.
Yeah, well, you get, I'll just describe him as the best of the best in the financial world. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, David.
Yeah.
Mr. Kotok, you mentioned that you've been a contributor to multiple different media. Do you still work with any media on regular basis?
No, I am a free agent. So I respond to reporters. I mean, Andrew Require called me from USA Today about the fight between Trump and Powell and what's going on at the Fed, and that my story got a little attention in some areas. And so, yeah, I talk to friends in business all the time. I am a strategic advisor to Cumberland Advisors. I'm no longer the chief investment officer or the chairman. There's much younger people who are doing all of that activity. People say, "What are you now?" I said, "Well, I used to be the chief investment officer. Now I'm the chief annoyance officer." That's so. But I, s- I, I don't want to stop. I love what I do. I have since the grocery store. I have always been interested in economic and financial relationships and how they work. And I have always believed that economics, and which is a subject I've studied extensively, is a social science, not a mathematical science. We use math, we use a lot of math, but it's a social science. So Daniel Kahneman's treatise on behavioral finance, thinking fast and slow. If your viewers are going to read two books, I'd like it if they read my book, but if they're going to read a book to help them invest and make decisions, what to buy, what to sell, when to do it, how to conduct things, read Thinking Fast and Slow by the late Daniel Kahneman and the research work he did with his colleague, for which uh, all of us in the financial arena should be thankful. Behavioral finance is what it's all about in the money business. So my book will give you some history. His book will help you do it.
Well, we'll definitely place links to your books, sir, and we'll add some description. The reason why I was asking if you still contribute to different media was because obviously I had a follow-up question. Would you be against meeting with us, with myself and Mr. Cody every other month or maybe every other 5 weeks to share more about what's happening in your life, in your researches, in your publications?
Well, I don't know about every 5 weeks, but let's do this. Let's succeed and complete this one.
Of course.
And you may find you've lost half your viewers. In which case,
No.
you might say, I don't think we should bring them back. We could lose the other half. So let's go through and finish chapter 1, and then we'll get to chapter 2.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I might add, and Victor might not be aware, but and Mr. Kotok's actually being pretty humble. I mean, this is the gentleman who, during the Silicon Bank crisis, which was really major here in California, David Kotok was part of the advisory group on how to handle that situation. It was handled very professionally. It could have been a total disaster, a run on cash, but Mr. Kotok was involved in that, thank God.
Well,
And there's many other things I could talk about, like debt ceilings, and there's just a lot in interest rates. So Mr. Kotok has really a vast knowledge, and he's definitely one of the major resources that the Treasury looks to, and the central bank. So we really didn't even cover all that.
well, I had I just want to correct one thing to be clear,
Okay.
uh, if I might, Cody. The decisions about Silicon Valley Bank were made by the Federal Reserve. I had no part in that. The Federal Reserve faced an extraordinary difficult issue. And if there's one thing to credit Jay Powell, it is saving the country from a meltdown, and it's not well understood. So we were up against a debt ceiling. The Congress was playing the political game with the debt ceiling. The Treasury was against the debt ceiling, which meant it was in reduction of the balance, and it could not access markets legally to sell Treasury bills. There's $100 billion line that the Federal Deposit Insurance Corp has with the U.S. Treasury. But the Treasury, to activate it, has to sell a cash management bill. And it couldn't do it because of the stupidity of the Congress to use the debt limit as a political tool. Now Silicon Valley has a run. So the Federal Reserve has a very special emergency power that allows it to lend to a federal agency. The FDIC is a federal agency. So the FDIC had to seize the bank under this very extraordinary provision. To seize the bank, then it became the bank. Then the Fed could lend to the FDIC, not to Silicon Valley Bank as we knew it, but to the receiver, the FDIC. To implement that procedure, the FDIC has to seize the bank and take it. Then the FDIC has to go to the Fed to say, fund us. The Fed has to have a board of governors meeting to approve the emergency lending, and then the Secretary of the Treasury has to approve it. That took 6 hours. The meltdown in the financial markets were in those 6 hours because nobody knew. They didn't have to face this before. Had the knuckleheads not had the debt ceiling, the FDIC could have said to Treasury, lend us $100 billion. We make all the deposits. We don't have a meltdown. I was on a plane to Costa Rica. I landed. I'm on the phone with a client. The client says to me, can you call Janet Yellen? The client says, can you call Janet Yellen? I said, I think she's a little busy right now. He says, my company has $40 million in a demand deposit at that bank. We will file bankruptcy tomorrow. And I said, there's 300 like you. Well, what are you going to do? I said, what am I going to do? I'm in Costa Rica just getting off a plane. What do you want me to do? Call Janet Yellen. I said, I know Janet Yellen. I've met Janet Yellen. She's a very nice person. I suspect my call to her these days in this firestorm is not the highest on her priority, but I have great confidence from the people I know that this fire will not be a forest fire because they have a tool. And it took a few hours. Now, by the way, the Fed has the procedures in place so the tool can operate in 2 minutes. With Silicon Valley Bank, it was the first time. So if you want to say, do we really want to mess with the Federal Reserve? Do we really want to reopen these tools? Do we really want to open up this legislation? Is this system really broken? Look at Silicon Valley Bank and the response. 300 companies didn't go bankrupt. Their employees didn't get laid off. Do you want to change that system? I don't think so. This is a good place to stop for today.
Mr. Kotok, thank you very much for sharing your time with us, with our viewers. Mr. Cody, thank you as well for joining us and making this exceptional to me meeting happen. And Mr. Kotok, our viewers are mainly small businesses. Therefore, I'm sure that they will be thrilled to watch the episode. They will be thrilled to meet you with our tool, with our podcast, and we will be definitely happy to have you again and again soon.
Well, first see what the results are. A good economist will say, get the data before you do the next step. But it's been nice to have the conversation. I enjoyed being with you very much.
Thank you, sir. Likewise. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to see you again, David, and thanks for your time. Honest account. You're a brilliant man, and you're one of those that you're able to take the complex and bring it down to more simple terms for our viewers. So I appreciate your time today.